Welcome back, everybody. Happy Monday. We are in the sixth division preview of the eight total divisions in the NFL, which means we're almost done. Let us just get it. Let's have some fun. This is OC and TJ, aka the Collin Callahan Show, aka the 23-year-old that looks like he's 15 that just rambles and rambles and rambles about football. So let me just share the screen here and we'll just get started right away. Um, First up, we got the Detroit Lions, who are coming off another heartbreaking finish to what was just a magical season. And the Bobby Lane curse just lives on, unfortunately. They had a 15-2 record. They had the number one seed in the NFC, yet they go home in their first playoff game of the year as they fall to the Washington Commanders 45-31. So Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn are now gone. They're two coordinators from the last few years. In comes John Morton and Kelvin Shepard, both getting promoted to, being the main guys in charge. So that's going to be pretty interesting to see, how both of those two run their respective sides of the ball. But in my opinion, as long as Dan Campbell is there, you got nothing to worry about. It's going to be, everything's going to be fine. Jared Goff is coming off a strong season, 37 touchdown passes, 12 interceptions, finished second in passer rating, yards per game, and yards per attempt. But it was those turnovers, or four of the turnovers that he committed in that playoff game that kind of led to that downfall against the Commanders. Obviously, there were injuries in the secondary and on pretty much everybody on that defensive side. But when you turn the ball over, all it does is just cost you a lot more momentum. And, Washington was able to run away with that. Looking at this offense, it's pretty much the same as it's been the last couple of seasons. It's still one of the most dynamic and most explosive units in football, mainly because of that running back tandem right there. You got Jahmyr Gibbs finishing fifth in rushing yards with over 1,400, tied for the league in touchdowns with 16, 5.6 yards per carry. And you got David Montgomery, who only played, 14 games last year and still managed to get over 700 yards with 12 touchdowns. So you got to make sure that, these two are getting as much production as possible. And that they're one of the most well-balanced offenses in football. So I think, John Morton is going to make sure that that philosophy does not change anytime soon. And more importantly, implementing those two in the offense is going to open up that dynamic passing attack. You still got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams coming off a breakout year, had 1,000 yards. Tim Patrick starting to, regain his legs, working back from, the injuries that he suffered over the last few seasons. And there's one kid that I think is really underrated. His name is Isaac Tesla. He's a third-round pick out of Arkansas, but he's from the Michigan area. He grew up, born and raised in Hudsonville, which is just a couple hours outside of Detroit. He ended up going to Hillside, which is the D2 program, before he ended up transferring to Arkansas because he wanted to, push for a career in the NFL, and he got the recognition that he received and that he deserved. And that's why the Lions took it with a day two pick. And also, you got a pretty solid tight end. You got Sam Laporta, obviously, who's going to, be a bigger focal point of the passing attack. And you've got one of the best run blocking tight ends in Brock Wright. So offensively, you have nothing to worry about, especially because you still have one of the top 5 offensive lines in football. Graham Glasgow, he will take over from Frank Ragnow, the recently retired starting center. They drafted Tate Radledge in, the second round. So that way, the offensive line will be able to make sure that there aren't any holes or gaping, patches that they got to fix. Still got Penei Sewell, Taylor Decker, and, Christian Mahogany. He's got promoted to being the left guard because they let Kevin Zeidler walk away in free agency. So I've got nothing to worry about when it comes to their offense. Defensively, it just has to stay healthy. And they'll be somewhat, competent. Last year, Aaron Glenn definitely had his hands full with so many injuries. The biggest one, obviously, Aiden Hutchinson, only played 5 games, was on his way to making a legitimate case to winning Defensive Player of the Year, just with how great of a season that he was having. And then he goes down, and unfortunately, the pass rush was never able to have, that type of oomph and that type of fire. They lost to Darius Smith in free agency, who I think was their leading sacker. He had 9 overall, but he also started the year with Cleveland. So 4 with Cleveland, 5 with Detroit. So not, the best numbers if you're on Detroit's side there. DJ Reader only had 3 sacks, and Lee McNeil only had 3.5. They drafted Tyleik Williams in the first round, but he's really more of a run stuffer than anything. They lost Levi Onwuzurike early in the year due to a torn ACL, who was also one of their key run stuffers. Ali McNeil, he's trying to work his way back from injury, missed extended period of time. And, Marcus Davenport didn't really have, the same type of, impact that he did with New Orleans. So it's honestly been really disappointing. The run defense, on the other hand, has probably been the least of their issues because they finished fifth in rush yards per game. And this is with Alexander Zaloni only playing 10 games. Jack Campbell coming off an outstanding sophomore season with over 130 tackles. You got Derek Barnes in there as a great rotational piece. So run defense is not an issue. The pass defense, though, that's what I really want to see because Terrion Arnold is going to finally have a chance to prove that he's worthy of being a number one corner. They lost Carlton Davis in free agency, so it's time for the first-round pick to really show what he's made of. And fortunately, he's going to have plenty of help with DJ Reed, who has been more than a solid corner in this league, had a great stint with the Jets. Earlier, he was with Seattle and San Francisco. So you're getting a good you're getting a good number two option here with DJ Reed. And more importantly, you got the best safety tandem in football, in my opinion, because Kirby Joseph is coming off one of the best seasons that we have seen from a safety ever. 9 interceptions, a 29.2 passer rating allowed, 12 passes defended, a first-team All-Pro selection, and rightfully so. And you pair him up with Brian Branch, who's coming off a four interception season with 16 passes defended. You got nothing to worry about on that front. And you put Amik Robinson in the nickel with Avonte Maddox as a quality depth option. If you're Kelvin Shepherd, all you got to make sure is that one of their key starters, or more than a few key starters, I should say, does not go down for an extended period of time, because that was their downfall last year, and I don't want this to be another vice in the 2025 season. So I expect them to win the division again. As long as Dan Campbell is going to be there, everything's going to be sound. Everything's going to be fundamentally correct. They're going to play with that grit and that passion and intensity that we've seen from them since he took over as the head coach in 2021. So if you ask me where the Lions put in, here's the thing. They'll definitely get in. I think they're going to have an 11-win season, to be quite honest with you. And to be quite honest, I don't know if I want to put them in the legit contenders category yet. I really don't. I'm going to put them right here because – actually, no. I'll put them right here because they're going to be, one of the teams that is going to compete for a chance to be in the NFC Championship game. But let's look at the Lions since Dan Campbell has been there. Obviously, the first year, they are bad. They only win 3 games. They play with a lot of fight and intensity in those games, but 3 wins is still 3 wins. The next year, they barely missed the playoffs at 9-8. The third year, they get to the NFC Championship for the first time in over 30 years, but they blow a 24-7 lead to the San Francisco 49ers. It was a game that they were about to ramrod Hamley and win easily, but, they got in their own way with the 4th down attempts and the defense predictably falling apart at the worst possible time, and it just wasn't their year. The next season was when they had that 15-2 season, and they lose to Washington. So the reason why I say the Bobby Lane curse lives on is that every time that there's a sliver amount of hope, there's always something that leaves a dent in their plans, whether it's by their own self-doing or some freak incident or occurrence that just happens along the way. So I'm going to put them in this category for now because we actually have to see them win these games and get to those points, the conference championship and the Super Bowl, for us to believe that they're going to be legit contenders this time. They have the pieces. That they've got the coaching staff in place. The core is still intact. That the defense, when healthy, has a chance to do something spectacular this year. We just have to see it before we actually believe it. And that's why I'm putting them in the second tier of teams. I know people are going to be outraged and say that they should be in the top tier category, but once again, you got to make sure that you get out of your own way because this is the team that everybody wants to win. You just have to not lose focus. Don't get too high or too low and just stay locked in. And the rest will take care of itself. For the Minnesota Vikings, they're coming off an outstanding season as well. And to be quite honest, I don't think anybody else was more deserving of Coach of the Year than Kevin O'Connell. With all the turmoil and strife and adversity they had to go through before that season began, one of your rookie defensive backs passes away before the season starts. You lose J.J. McCarthy for the entire season due to a torn meniscus. One of your starting defensive backs goes down with a torn ACL, and you still win 14 games with Sam Darnold as your quarterback. That's just flat out remarkable and incredible, and it just shows what type of man and what type of human being O'Connell is, and more importantly, it shows just how much these players want to win for him. So I got nothing but the utmost regards and respect for him. And to be quite honest, I gotta stop using that phrase. But in my opinion, if Sam Darnold could win 14 games with this team, I don't understand how JJ McCarthy cannot have the same amount of success. You look at this offense, it looks like one of the most talented offenses in the league. Let's start with the best receiver at Justin Jefferson. 1,500 receiving yards, 103 catches, 10 touchdowns. Yeah, Jamar Chase won the Triple Crown, but if he's 1A, if Jamar Chase is 1A, then Justin Jefferson is 1B, and vice versa. I would have Justin Jefferson as my 1A just because, he hasn't had, an elite quarterback to throw him the football, and he's still putting those outstanding numbers, while Jamar Chase has been fortunate to have Joe Burrow his entire career. But listen, Justin Jefferson is going to be the key focal point of this offense. And if he's doubled, then when he comes back from suspension, Jordan Addison has proven to be a solid number 2 option. Jalen Nailor setting career highs last year in catches, yards, and touchdowns. TJ Hawkinson working his way back from that torn ACL showed a lot of improvement and showed a lot of progress. And you got Aaron Jones, who's fresh coming off a 1,000-yard season in his first season with the Vikings. They spent the entire offseason by trying to retool that offensive line. They let Garrett Bradbury walk. They traded away Ed Ingram. They signed Ryan Kelly and Will Fries in free agency, 2 quality interior guards. You still got Christian Darrisaw. You still have Brian O'Neill at your tackle positions. And they drafted Donovan Jackson with their first-round pick. So they're going to make sure that this offensive line does not become a liability for J.J. McCarthy, as it sort of was for Sam Darnold. The reason why I say sort of was because, Sam Darnold definitely has the tendency to hold on to the football a lot. But at the end of the day, they still allowed the 3rd highest pressure percentage, and they were tied for 23rd in sacks allowed at 49. So that's not good at all. Defensively, they're going to be the backbone of this football team. They're one of the most aggressive units in football. 5th in points allowed, 4th on 3rd down. Led the league in takeaways. 2nd fewest passer rating. They led the league in blitz percentage. Unsurprising. 9th in pressure percentage. 4th in sacks. 4th fewest rush yards per carry. 2nd fewest rush yards per game. They did lose a few key pieces, like Cam Bynum and Stephon Gilmore, but they still made sure that the big dogs were still going to, take care of business. They added Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave to really beef up that defensive line. You still have Jonathan Grenard coming off an outstanding season with 12 sacks. Andrew Van Ginkel, 11.5, really thriving as a starting pass rusher, which we all kind of expected after the Miami Dolphins let him walk away in free agency. Your linebacking core is stacked. You got Blake Cashman coming off probably the best season of his career, 112 tackles with 4.5 sacks. Ivan Pace, someone you could really work, in so many different levels, coming off a 72 tackle season with a few sacks. And the secondary is what I really want to pay attention to, because you still got Byron Murphy, who had 6 picks last year. They signed Isaiah Rodgers to be the second corner, which I honestly don't know how to feel about that, but he's coming off a year where he only allowed an 80 passer rating. So he's having, a tremendous comeback season. He did have a tremendous comeback season with Philadelphia. The safety room, though, I've got no issues with it. Josh Metellus, they gave him a nice extension, over 100 tackles with an 87.8 passer rating allowed, 2 picks. And Harrison Smith is entering year 14, still playing at a high level with a few interceptions as well. So I don't want this season to be a repeat of 2023 where, they get off to a horrendous start, then they manage to work their way back to having a 500 record, then the starting quarterback goes down again, and it's just a carousel at that position, and it unfortunately leads you guys to getting eliminated from the playoffs. I'm going to put the Vikings in the just get in category, because I know that when they're fully healthy, this team is one of the most, fun teams to watch. If the Lions weren't in their division, it might have been Minnesota hosting a home playoff game with the number 1 seed in their control. So I think they're going to win about 10 games, and J.J. McCarthy is the X factor. You need to make sure that he continues to improve, that he continues to succeed, and that everybody else helps him along the way as well, because it's not just one guy out there. It requires 53 men to go on a legitimate and deep playoff run. And I think if any coach could get this done, it's Kevin O'Connell. Another coach I'm really fond of, Matt LaFleur. The Green Bay Packers are in a similar situation that the Houston Texans were in just last year. A team that was, pretty good last year, but wasn't as great as we all hoped to be. And I think a big reason why was just because of Jordan Love. Not so much because of his performance, but because of the injuries that he suffered last year. He had the MCL injury that kept him out a few weeks. Then there was the groin pull, then the shoulder near the end of the season. And now he's just coming back from practice after tearing a ligament in his thumb, and he had to have a procedure on it. So you need to make sure that your franchise quarterback is healthy at all costs. And I know that Malik Willis did pretty good in backup duty, but without Jordan Love, they're nowhere near a playoff contender. Last year, he threw 25 touchdowns, 11 picks. A healthy stat line, but not as good as it was last year. And I think this season, he's definitely going to need to have a breakout year for this team to really show that they are worthy of going on a legitimate playoff run. But last year as well, they were 30th in pass attempts and 5th in rush attempts. And a huge reason why was because of this man right here, Josh Jacobs, having an outstanding first year with the Green Bay Packers, over 1,300 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns. But my biggest question mark is not the running game, because we know that Matt LaFleur is going to make sure that it is one of the top tenets of their offense. I want to see who's going to step up in the wide receiver room, because Christian Watson is going to miss an extended period of time due to a torn ACL. Dontavian Wicks is coming off a pretty down year, and Romeo Doubs has been floating around the trade block. So that's why in the first round, you draft Matthew Golden. You still have Jaden Reed, who is an explosive deep threat, who can also be a speedster, and more importantly is, considered to be the unself-claimed, the unheralded number one option on this football team. So I want to see the competition between these two. I want to see him have an improved season. I want to see Dontavian Wicks try to, step up in his role. And more importantly, I want to see what the tight ends are going to be able to do, because Tucker Kraft has definitely proven to be this team's security blanket with over 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. But Luke Musgrave was the higher draft pick, and he's not coming off a great season. His snaps diminished as a result of, Kraft's quote-unquote breakout year. And I think this is a duo that, can definitely, be utilized properly with the right coaching staff in place. With the offensive line, they definitely made some changes. They, signed Aaron Banks at free agency. They gave Zach Tom a huge extension. Obviously, David Bakhtiari, he retired. I think that was already last year, but you still got Rasheed Walker at left tackle, Elton Jenkins. They kept him around as their starting center, Sean Ryan at right guard. Offensive line, I have no issues with whatsoever. I have no concerns about it. It's one of the top 5 lines of the league. It allowed the second fewest sacks in football at 22. So you just got to make sure that the passing game clicks and that it's not an incredibly one-sided offense. Defensively, I can never really get a full gauge on them, because the numbers indicate more good than bad, but it's not by a long shot. They're 6th in points allowed, 5th in yards allowed. They allowed the 4th most takeaways. They got the 4th most takeaways, I should say. 9th in passer rating, 8th in sacks, 3rd fewest rush yards per carry, 7th in rush yards per game. Those are great numbers. Those are the ones that you want to see. But then you look at the down ones. 13th on third down, 20th in the red zone, 25th in completion percentage, 2nd lowest blitz percentage, and 20th in pressure percentage. So plenty of good, but also plenty of bad. Not necessarily great, not terrible. It's a pretty good defense at their best. It has a good group of selective guys, especially on their pass rush. You got Rashawn Gary, Devontae Wyatt. You still got Kenny Clark, Brandon Cox, Carl Brooks, Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Adebawore. It's a selective committee. Not really a true standout pass rusher. I honestly think it should be this guy or that guy, but 7.5 sacks was the highest amount that a Green Bay Packers player had last year, and that went to this man. So everybody else got their fair share of their, quarterback takedowns. It also has, this Green Bay Packers defense, it has one of the deepest linebacking rooms in the league. Isaiah McDuffie, coming off an outstanding year, 97 tackles. Quay Walker was their leader with 102, and Edgerrin Cooper had 87, along with 3.5 sacks. So you know that whenever one of these three are on the field, they're going to make sure that they make an impact as much as possible. And you've got Isaiah Simmons as a good depth piece, someone that you could work down the field in any position whatsoever. You could have him play safety, corner, weak linebacker, have him on the line, whatever the case may be. You might not have him as your starter, but someone that you could utilize to the best of your abilities if you're Jeff Hafley, the defensive coordinator. As for the secondary, it's going to be pretty interesting to see how they're going to perform without Jair Alexander. He already missed a lot of time last year. He only played 7 games, but you got to be able to figure out who's going to be your number one corner. I mean, Nate Hobbs is coming off a strong year with the Raiders. Keyshawn Nixon allowed 101.2 rates, so I'm not really sold on him. He's definitely a better special teamer than he is a corner, so it's most likely going to go to Hobbs. But I don't necessarily trust that he's going to be the number one corner to rely upon when you're going up against the Giants. Because the biggest downfall for the Green Bay Packers last year was that they couldn't beat the best teams in the NFC. They lost to Philly twice, they lost to the Vikings twice, and they lost to the Lions twice. So those are the 3 teams that are clearly standing in their way. And I know that you've got Xavier McKinney, you've got Evan Williams, Carrington Valentine in the slot, Javon Bullard trying to have a better sophomore season than a rookie year. You got a lot of young guys that still have a lot to prove, that have a lot to polish. But you have to really see everything come together before you can say, yeah, no, this is the defense that's going to get us past the first round or even the second round to that extent. So I'm going to put the Green Bay Packers in the just okay category, to be quite honest with you, because I know that they have the quarterback that's going to get them to the playoffs. And I know that they have an outstanding running back. They're well coached, but the passing game has a lot of questions that they need to answer. And on the defensive side, like I said, you have so many guys that really need to step up. And you got to figure out, okay, who are going to be the top dogs? Is it still going to be Rashawn Gary? Is it still going to be Xavier McKinney? Will Quay Walker, continue to rise and continue to elevate his game? Or is there someone that's going to emerge onto the scene and say, y'all forgot about me? To figure out. Now we finally get to the last team on our team, the Chicago Bears, the city that I'm going to be moving to in a couple of weeks. And they have hope for the first time in who knows how long. I mean, their fans always have the deluded false hope that, oh, this might be the year. 2 years ago, Justin Fields, DJ Moore finally has a weapon to throw to, an outstanding defense. We've got it. We're going to make it back to the playoffs. Nope, only 7 wins. The next year, you draft Caleb Williams with the first overall pick. You still have DJ Moore. You draft Rome Odunze. You have Keenan Allen. Running game is intact. Offensive line, maybe not so great, but you can work your way around it. Defense still has the same amount of lethal playmakers that you once had the last 2 years. And then everything else fell off the rails. Matt Eberflus got fired. The offensive coordinator got fired, and they only won 5 games. And why they hired Ben Johnson, because they figured that he's going to be the guy that is not only going to get this offense back on track and get them back to the respectable position that they once had over 30 years ago, possibly even longer, 40 years ago. But at the same time, you got to make sure that this Bears team is back on the map and back in that playoff contending window, because that city has been waiting way too long for them to just have another failed quarterback, another failed head coach, and another failed general manager that has done everything in his power to make sure that they have a winning team in the Windy City. No pun intended. Let's start with Caleb Williams, who is definitely coming off a trivial rookie season, to say the least. 20 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions. Not a horrible stat line, not great, but hey, listen, for the Chicago Bears, those are like the best numbers that any rookie has ever put up for them. Not saying much, considering the amount of guys that have completely whiffed. Still a sign of progress. The only downfall was that he was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. A huge chunk of it had to do with their offensive line, but some of it does have to do with the style of Caleb Williams, who tends to run around a lot, who tries to make a lot of unnecessary plays happen. So Ben Johnson's job is to make sure that it's kept out of balance, that those negative mistakes get cleaned up, and that, the only goal is to make sure that he just elevates his game. The offense looks slightly different than it did the year before, at least in the skill position room. You still have DeAndre Swift, so he's going to be your starting running back. They drafted one, I think, in the 3rd round, Kyle Manangai. I hope I'm saying that right. So maybe he could work his way up the depth chart, but Swift is coming off a year where he ran for over 900 yards and 6 touchdowns. So you know that he can still play at a really high level. In the passing game, Moore's still there. Rome Odunze. You sign up Lamine Zaccheaus. They also drafted Luther Burden, with their second-round pick and used their first-rounder to draft a tight end, not Tyler Warren, but Colston Loveland, who is more than likely than not going to be the Sam Laporta of this offense. Because if you watch this highlight tape from Michigan, this guy's got great versatility. He's got incredible range. He picks up plenty of yards after catch. He's got the build and he's got the lean to make sure that he fits into that receiving role as a pass-catching tight end. And he's going to be a nice compliment to Cole Kmet, who's not coming off a great year by his standards, but it's going to be a fun tight end duo to watch, and it's going to be an extra weapon for Caleb Williams. The offensive line looks a million times better than it did last year, and it all starts with the interior. They traded for Jonah Jackson. They traded for Joe Thuney. They signed Drew Dahlman, who is the best center coming into the free agency period, to a 3-year deal. And you round out that interior with a quality right tackle in Darnell Wright, a decent blindside blocker in Braxton Jones. This is an offensive line that Ben Johnson wanted to focus on first and foremost when the offseason began, what Ryan Poles really wanted to fix because he knew it was their biggest weakness entering this 2025 season. And I think with the right coaching staff in place and with the right amount of receivers available and the quarterback that will give you the confidence and the swagger, this looks like an offense that could definitely work its way back into the postseason. Defensively, nothing's changed for the most part. Dennis Allen is going to be the new defensive coordinator who is more than proven to be a way better coordinator than a head coach. But last year, they were up and down as well. Not great, not terrible, just average at best. They were 13th in points, 27th in yards, second in the red zone, and 13th on third down. So they were the definition of bend but don't break. In free agency, they definitely spent a lot of time trying to fix the pass rush. You still have Montez Sweat, Austin Booker. Hopefully, he finally has a breakout season. You have Gervon Dexter coming off a strong year with 5 sacks and 19 quarterback hits. They signed Grady Jarrett and Dayo Odenigbo in free agency. So you're just hoping that if you're Dennis Allen, that it all starts with the front four and that they're generating enough pressure as possible to make sure that they, give their secondary enough time to just, take care of business on the back end. Last year, they were 16th in sacks, 5th in pressure percentage. So they're getting to the quarterback. They're just not finishing. And that's what it comes down to. My biggest, surprise when it came to the Bears defense was just how bad they were against the run. Because you got 2 outstanding linebackers in TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, both of which finished over 110 tackles. TJ Edwards had 129 in his case. And yet they still allowed the 5th most rush yards per carry and 5th most rush yards per game. So if you're Dennis Allen, that's got to be a key area of focus. But he's coming off a year where the Saints had one of the worst rushing defenses in the league as well. So you're just hoping that, it doesn't stay that subpar of a group or that run defense does not continue to be their biggest weakness. The secondary, it definitely showed ups and downs as well. 13th in passer rating, 3rd highest yards per attempt, 10th in completion percentage, and 16th in yards per game. On paper, this looks like an outstanding, feisty, young, hungry group of playmakers that know how to attack the football, that know how to slow down the opposing receivers, and more importantly, know how to, make an impact themselves. You still got one of the top 5 corners in the league at Jalen Johnson. Hopefully he heals up quickly and, gets healthy in time for week 1. Tyreek Stevenson, even with that gag against the Washington Commanders where he gave up the game-winning touchdown on the Hail Mary to Noah Brown, still coming off a solid season. 80.5 passer rating, 12 passes defended. Kyler Gordon needs to have a better year, 100 passer rating allowed. And in the safety room, you just need to make sure that Jaquan Brisker stays healthy because even though Kevin Byard had well over 110 tackles, he gave up 118.6 passer rating. So, his game has definitely fallen off in a way that I don't think anybody could have expected. Decent safety depth, but you need to make sure that Brisker stays on the field because he only played 5 games last year, and he still allowed a 41.7 passer rating with 40 tackles. Even though there is hope in the Windy City, I'm going to put them in the just okay category. And the reason why is because I've been saying over the last few years that I think that this team is capable of making it to the playoffs, but midway through the year, I get absolutely duped. I make myself a candidate for freezing cold takes, and they just self-implode at the worst possible time. So the only way I can actually believe that they'll make it to the playoffs is if I actually see it myself. They do have the head coach. They do have an improved offense, and the defense has not completely changed too much in a structured sense, right? Yeah. So I don't think they'll have a better record than the Green Bay Packers just because they have a lot of hills that they got to climb. Not only do they have to, catch up to Detroit and Minnesota, but beating Green Bay has to be the biggest priority. Now I understand they did that last year in week 18 in the regular season finale, but Green Bay starters didn't play the full game. And, I just think, listen, it was at Lambeau Field, but I want to see, Chicago do this in a higher stake performance. There you go. That's my take on the NFC North. Let's get over to the wheel and see who we're going to preview tomorrow and the day afterwards. All right. We have the AFC West tomorrow. So the division that features Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Bo Nix, and Geno Smith. We're going to talk about tomorrow, see how they do this year. And then on Wednesday, to round it all up, we got the NFC East. The team that's actually going to be on the regular season version of Hard Knocks this year. So Philly's trying to repeat. Washington is trying to show that last year wasn't a fluke. The Giants, they got a lot of ground they got to make up for. They got a new quarterback. No, they got two new quarterbacks, actually. And Brian Dable and Joe Shane are on the hottest of seats possible. And the Cowboys are still a soap opera. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. We'll be back tomorrow to preview the AFC West, Wednesday to preview the NFC East, and then afterwards, it's just getting ready for our fantasy football and week 1. Hope you have a great rest of your Monday. Have a great rest of your week. Can't believe that August is almost over, but we're heading into the final stretch here. So